For the past several years, the eyes of the world have been fixed on the Middle East as a civil war has raged throughout Syria, and millions of people have fled the horrors of ISIS and human rights abuses under President Bashar al-Assad. While the flood of refugees to Europe has been cause for debate among major Western powers, a humanitarian crisis of equal measure has been quietly brewing thousands of miles away in the Southeast Asian country of Myanmar. The Rohingya, a Muslim ethnic minority group, have lived in Buddhist-majority Burma for over 300 years, but are not recognized as one of the country's 135 distinct ethnic groups by the government. The Rohingya identity is traced back to the Arakan Kingdom, which ruled over the modern-day Rakhine state in western Myanmar from the 15th to 18th centuries, before it was captured by the British and incorporated into the British Raj. When the Union of Burma gained its independence from British India in 1948, the Rohingya had already endured years of oppression under the imperialist system. However, the new federalist government was unable to retain stability in the country, and political infighting gave way to a military coup in 1962, which established the military junta. The junta changed the country's name from Burma to Myanmar, and held absolute power over the country's affairs until 2011. A restriction of rights and personal freedoms affected all Burmese citizens, but the military soon began a targeted approach towards Rohingya, who were considered illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. The junta immediately denied the Rohingya access to full citizenship, but allowed them to register as temporary citizens by issuing them white cards, which gave them the right to vote. Recent militant action by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army and pressure from Buddhist nationalist groups caused the government to revoke white cards, which denied the Rohingya the opportunity to participate in the 2011 elections, which were widely heralded across the world as Myanmar's first free elections in over 25 years. Continued conflicts between a small minority of Rohingya extremists and military forces have caused the government to carry out policies of ethnic cleansing to drive out thousands of Rohingya from Myanmar in what they argue is a matter of national defense.
Over 200,000 Rohingya Muslims have been pushed into Bangladesh refugee camps due to the Myanmar government harshly taking military action against the Rohingya people. In a 2017 New York Times article, Rajuma, a Rohingya Muslim woman, recounts her terrifying experience of escaping the country. Soldiers raped, clubbed, and executed unarmed villagers. She tells the story of how soldiers came for her baby, threw it into a fire as she begged for mercy. Myanmar is currently not allowing the UN into these areas, so the number of killed civilians could range from 1,000 to more than 5,000 people. The government justifies these actions by claiming it was a response to Rohingya militia in order to obtain peace. However, over 200 Rohingya villages, filled with unarmed, innocent villagers, have been destroyed in these attacks. It is due to a fueled, long history of ethnic hatred to drive out and destroy Rohingya communities into Bangladesh, and the UN is now calling it an ethnic cleansing. Due to recent atrocities happening in Myanmar, nearly 1 million of these refugees are camped in these camps. These camps do not allow the people to become citizens or learn Bengali, so this further isolates the refugees. And although the Bangladesh have taken thousands of Rohingya people in, they still prioritize the needs of their own citizens first. Without the ability to work in Bangladesh, refugees depend on food rations from the World Food Program, so it is a really big struggle to get food to everybody. The locals are also protesting the camps because of the economic and political problems the refugees have brought. Wages are low due to an increase of cheap labor, the population is rapidly growing, and the environment is being polluted. The Bangladesh people want to send refugees back to Myanmar, which leaves the Rohingya with no place to go. These refugees, who have made temporary homes in the sandy hills of Bangladesh, currently face the upcoming monsoon season as well. With almost 20 to 30 inches of rain a month, their shelters could be destroyed and water sources could be contaminated in the floods, spreading disease.
The Rohingya refugee crisis is made all the more complex by the influence of Aung San Suu Kyi over the country's politics. Suu Kyi is the daughter of General Aung San, a hero of the Burmese struggle for independence and considered by many to be the father of the nation. Raised in India by her diplomat mother and educated at Oxford, Suu Kyi returned to Myanmar in the 1980s and soon became involved in a wave of protests demanding democracy. She gained a large following in the country and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1991 for her advocacy for human rights and democracy. She spent 15 years in house arrest for speaking out against the military, cementing her status as a human rights icon. She was later freed in 2011 during the country's period of liberalization, and her party, the National League for Democracy, won a majority of elections throughout the country. Yet she herself was constitutionally barred from assuming the office of presidency because her children were British-born foreign nationals. However, Suu Kyi currently acts as the country's de facto leader as Counselor of State and represents Myanmar on the world stage. In recent years, she has been criticized for her silence regarding the plight of the Rohingya and her refusal to condemn the military, even calling into question the validity of the term Rohingya as a legitimate ethnic identity. International condemnation has mounted against her, leading for many to call for her Nobel Peace Prize to be revoked. As Counselor of State, however, Suu Kyi has no control over the military, and outright support for a Muslim minority would have a severe effect on her political influence. Given that she relies on the support and the approval of the military, it appears as though she is willing to overlook the Rohingya in order to push her country on a path towards democracy.
The international community has responded to the Rohingya crisis in a very polarized way. For example, China has blocked attempts to address the ethnic cleansing happening during the UN Security Council in order to strengthen relations with the Myanmar government. In addition, India has announced it will deport 40,000 Rohingya refugees from its country in order to create a relationship with the Myanmar military in hopes of gaining support against militants in northeast India. Also, Malaysia does not grant refugees legal status, meaning there's no legal work, healthcare, or education. While other communities and organizations have ignored the humanitarian obligation to help the Rohingya, the UNHCR, aka the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and other aid groups have been working in camps to build safer and more efficient ways to access drinking water. In addition, the UN has been investigating the accusations that Myanmar forces have raped, murdered, and tortured the Rohingya. Recently, the EU has signed as a witness for 2 more ethnic groups signing to the agreement called the National Ceasefire Agreement. The NCA, which was founded in 2015 by the Myanmar government, was sent to 15 ethnic groups. While only 8 signed, it was still a step to create peace. The end goal is to end all military operations in Myanmar by building trust in negotiations. Also, popular newspapers and sites such as BBC, NPR, New York Times, and CNN have broadcasted awareness of these atrocities with interviews, photos, and articles. This is extremely important because it sheds light on what's happening in the world.
So far, Western countries have taken little direct action to punish Myanmar and individuals in the military who are responsible for perpetrating ethnic cleansing. Bill Richardson, the former American ambassador to the United Nations, argued in Time magazine that Western countries must take more proactive steps to condemn Myanmar and assist Bangladesh, whose borders have swelled with thousands of refugees in recent years. Potential solutions to the conflict include withholding aid to Myanmar until the safe repatriation of refugees is guaranteed, investment in development in the poverty-stricken Rakhine state, targeted sanctions against military officials, and investigations into human rights abuses and appropriate punitive punishment for the crimes of ethnic cleansing and genocide. The international community must continue to support Bangladesh, as political and social opinions towards Rohingya are beginning to sour in the country, and the government recently approved a plan to relocate 100,000 refugees to an uninhabitable and flood-prone island in the Bay of Bengal by 2019. Ambassador Richardson also warned that social integration must become a priority for countries hosting refugees to avoid radicalization among vulnerable and frustrated populations. Finally, Western countries must begin to open their borders to Rohingya refugees and lessen the burden on Bangladesh and other poor Southeast Asian countries.